1946, an orphan girl named Jenny May led a charming life on the coast of Maine in a quaint town called Bar Harbor. She lived with two kind caretakers, John and Rose Hampton, and 13 fellow orphans who loved her dearly. Jenny was a happy girl, but she was not content with her lot, as much as she tried to be. Each day when she strolled along the shore, where the rocky beaches met the ocean, she saw the horizon full with opportunity that could almost be heard calling her name, inviting her to take part in some adventure. Normal life, as she saw it, was mundane and full of colors that had faded over the years of her childhood. All was as predictable as the tide that came in and went out, the newspaper that was flung in every yard at 7 o'clock in the morning, the bell that tolled every Sunday, the children who played at the village square after school each evening, the view of the sailboats from the hill at Agamont Park, the tourists who saw it fresh and intriguing. But to Jenny, it was all she had ever known. As the days passed by, she sensed something new in the salty air, an exciting chill in the late April rain, and a hopeful notion that she would wake up soon and her days would no longer repeat themselves. Indeed, the dawning of adventure was at hand for dear Miss Jenny May.
Time to get up, it's time to get ready, ready to start a new day. And we will not fear, and we will not worry of what comes our way. And in the night we will never grow old, never grow old. And when the day comes, the stories all told, look for the light and you will see.
Every now and then, when the night was dark and thunderclouds kept the moonlight from shining through the big bedroom window, John and Rose Hampton would sing a lullaby that comforted the girls in their worries and troubles. Being orphans, many of them missed their parents and cried every night, longing to see them again. Some felt lost inside, for they had never known their family. Others simply had bad days, for no matter how cheerful you may be, there will still be times when you don't get much sunshine. Regardless of what the girls were going through, the lullaby would always reassure them that better times were yet to come, and they were loved no matter what. Should they be bothered with doubts, each of them had a little candle at their bedstand to remind them of the light that would be waiting for them in the morning. As they lit their candles one by one, a gentle tune eased the anxious minds and brought a smile to sleepy faces.
Don't worry, little ones, when days don't go your way. There is so much for you, it's waiting. So dream about tomorrow. Don't worry, little ones, when troubles come your way. For there will come a day
Not far from where Jenny and the girls resided at Hampton Home, there lived an old woman who the townsfolk called Widow Sue. She had lost her husband to the battlefield in France during the First World War against the Central Powers. She never remarried after her husband died, and although she had loved him very much, she believed that one day they would reunite on the heavenly shore. When Widow Sue walked along the town pier, she would always smile to those that passed by. Her joy and tranquility was always being shared with the fretful and busy world. Long ago, while her husband fought for America in Europe, Sue shared her home with her friend named Maybelle, while France was occupied with the war. While Sue visited with her companion, she learned that Maybelle's son and daughter-in-law had disappeared, leaving her granddaughter, Elise, in her care. Elise was a sweet young girl at the time and loved her grandmother very much. Maybelle was not worried about her, but she did not know where her son and his wife had gone and what would happen to them. Many years later, after Maybelle had returned to France and Sue had lost her husband, she received a letter from her friend which said, "Dear Sue, I write this letter to tell you I've just learned I have another granddaughter living somewhere in Maine. I do not know the exact location of her whereabouts. We have finally managed to trace the steps of my son, who supposedly died with his wife in an accident years ago. The steps led us there. I cannot travel, of course, being sick as I am, so I depend on you, my trusted friend, to help me find my granddaughter. Jenny was my daughter-in-law's favorite name, and I know that if she had another girl, that would be her name. Please help bring her back to me, Sue. Sincerely, Maybelle May." As fate would have it, Widow Sue knew exactly where to find Jenny, for they were already friends. They had tea every Tuesday, saw movies at the Criterion Theater on rainy days, and on sunny days they had a marvelous time chatting about the many intriguing aspects of life. As quickly as she could, Widow Sue eagerly wrote back to Maybelle, telling her the good news that Jenny was found.
Maybelle May, I found your girl. She's everything you said she'd be. She lights up when she smiles, doesn't seem to have a care. I only hope that she can see that you've been waiting for so long. It shouldn't be too long now before she comes to you. But she doesn't have a clue that she has relatives and friends. I only hope she'll give her future this chance. Your friend, Sue.
While Widow Sue was busy corresponding with Maybelle, Jenny and the girls occupied themselves with future fantasies. While most of the girls reveled in daydreams of charming young men and the fluttery feeling that occurred with such dreams, Jenny could not help but observe the longing in her heart to leave, to find something new about the world she lived in. She was tired of dreaming and not ever finding in reality what only lived in her imagination. She loved her friends here at Hampton Home, for they were practically her sisters, but none of them understood the way she felt, as their minds were so preoccupied with the matters of the heart.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
What does happen when you see him?
my heart stops in the suspension. When I fix my gaze upon him, he looks back at me with those dark and daring eyes. And did I mention that there's people in this mind of mine, particularly of the male kind, that always find a way. When I'm lying down at night, how I hold my blanket tight, dream that he could be mine. I can only dream that he could be mine. Each and every day, and you know where he's from. Must be a heavenly place. Good night, sweet.
You girls speak gibberish.
You do not know where you've been until you're standing by his side in the light, in the sun, where you've been so many times walking around. Now my heart is different with him there in my heart. Now my heart is different with him Chasing a boy, I'm in love. Let me go and find you. Many times I've dreamed the same. But maybe lately something more is calling me. Something certain, something true. Know what to do. Here at home, I know. How could I need anything more? Don't mind me, boy. I just wish that I could see what is waiting for me.
One day, news was brought by the mayor to the people of Bar Harbor that there was to be a banquet at the town hall in honor of the lives bravely sacrificed during World War II. The mayor also wanted to recognize the surviving soldiers and the women who had to manage their households on their own, the doctors and nurses who tended to the sick and injured, and even caretakers like John and Rose Hampton, who took in lost and orphaned children who had no one to call family. When the day of the anticipated event arrived, the townsfolk bustled, preparing for the evening party. Jenny was at the town hall, serving alongside her trusted friend Ollie, who was the adopted son of an old captain, Charlie Ward. As they worked, Jenny told Ollie all about her hopes and dreams to venture beyond the little world she knew.
I want to be on the sea, feeling so free. You don't know how long I've been thinking about feeling that free. It's been an eternity. to be stuck errand running. Busy all day, but it sure feels like nothing. I want a reason to want to see right where I am. But I don't know how to get it.
Well, I'm quite experienced.
Despite your appearance,
I'm a sage in the making.
are you just playing?
Well, now I'm being serious. Jenny May, your life is young, for goodness sake. You've just begun to be perfectly, honestly clear with you. There are some things that might bother you.
What, like fear? 'Cause I don't have it.
Well, the ocean is great, call it pleasantly comfortable. Taking adventures is always so grand. I'm just not quite sure if you'll like how it rocks back and forth. Makes you feel a little sick. You get over it pretty quick. There's limited choices of food on the menu. You eat it all up and you hunger, and then you can't wait to land out familiar land. So if you can see past the cons to the sea, you might could make a good deckhand like me.
You're stellar great friend, so I guess we'll just see if
Adventure is waiting
if I'll ever be free.
out on the great big blue sea.
Captain Charlie watched from a distance while Ollie and Jenny laughed joyfully together, and a smile appeared on his face. Suddenly he felt a hand on his shoulder. "Charles!" a familiar voice muttered. "Sue! What a pleasant surprise!" Captain Charles' smile grew and crinkles formed around his eyes. Widow Sue was a special friend from his teenage years. "It's good to see you, Charles," she chuckled. She was beautiful, even in her old age, and her eyes were blue as the sea, reflecting on her friends, which were blue like the sky. She told Captain Charlie that Jenny had family in France, and she should leave as soon as possible to reunite with her grandmother and sister. Upon hearing this, the captain explained very excitedly that he happened to be embarking for France that night. However, Sue grew worried, for she had not yet told Jenny about Maybelle, and was not sure how she would take the news. Later that night, while the banquet transpired, Ollie pulled Jenny aside and led her out the door. They were only planning to get away from the noise. However, they soon noticed Widow Sue and Captain Charlie standing in front of the building, conversing with each other quietly. "Jenny," Widow Sue called out, "I have something important to tell you." After hearing the news, Jenny's eyes welled up with tears of joy and utter amazement.
What do you have to do? Your family depends on you. Family, what is this that you say to me? There's no way it could ever be. I was found as a baby alone, with nobody to call my own. You should know, across the sea, you've a sister with family. You've a grandmother longing to know if you do choose to go. Well, tonight is your chance, for some trick or joke. I'm gonna be sick. No, I won't. Gotta stand. Please give me your hand. I knew it was a matter of time. This was approaching. I wanted to try something new, Widow Sue. This is all thanks to you. Changing, rearranging, something more is calling me. Something certain, finally true. Now I know just what to do. It's time to find my family.
Without saying any goodbyes, Jenny set off with Ollie, Captain Charlie, and a company of fellow travelers on the HM Ward, a large vessel that would take them across the Atlantic Ocean. Soon the morning came, bright many feelings of anticipation to Jenny's heart. She had never been on such a voyage and could hardly believe that she wasn't only dreaming, and to be on such an adventure to find her family. Everything about the experience filled her with a true sense of freedom and excitement she could hardly contain. The creak of the ship underneath the deck, the salty air above it, the sunset and sunrise like she'd never seen before. Because the HM Ward consisted mostly of older, sophisticated travelers, Jenny and Ollie spent most of their time with each other and grew closer as time passed by. However, one day they crossed paths with the ship handyman, who was certainly the most peculiar character Jenny and Ollie had ever met. He was not like the rest of the passengers. He was exciting and strange, as they soon discovered. Once he began telling them all about himself, they couldn't help but become his friend.
Well, all those days bouncing from job to job, you know, I get to thinking that I'm really not sure of anything. But I'm giving it another chance, and I'm living the dream.
Living the dream.
I could be a beggar on down the way, just a bump along, that's what they might say. Don't pay no mind to me. Whoops, I think I'm passing private property. If you're living a low down life, it don't matter as long as I am living free. I'm living free as long as I'm living free.
Well, sounds pretty good to me.
There's more.
I was hurting in my cage of self-despair. I wanted so bad to get out. I couldn't think of how to get there. I'm wanting to work. I'm wanting to be a somebody, even if it means I'm just shaggy old me. Not trying to get in anyone's way. No, I'm just living my day. Yup, I am just so happy sailing the sea. I'm wanting to work.
Wanting to work.
I'm wanting to be.
Wanting to be.
Somebody, even if it means I'm just shaggy old me. Not trying to get in anyone's way. No, I'm just living my day. Well, I am just so happy sailing the sea. Just shaggy old me. Just you and I now. Just you and me, huh? That's a good boy. I know you'll never leave me. I love you.
While Ollie and Jenny passed time on the HM ward, Captain Charlie was busy with important matters of his own. When he was alone, his characteristic joviality was smothered by a remembrance of past regrets. As a younger man, Captain Charlie was part of a small society made up of close friends. One of them was Widow Sue, before she became a widow, that is. Others were Jenny's grandmother, Maybelle, and Jenny's parents, who were younger than the others. One day, a man named Edgar joined their society and showed them something that changed their lives forever. He was an explorer and had found magical papers that would bring whatever one happened to draw on them to life. But those magical things did not stay alive forever. They would all disappear eventually. Unfortunately, Edgar had a limited supply of the papers. Well, everyone was amazed at first by the magical papers. They had certainly never seen anything of that sort before. However, the friends had already begun to fight over what to do with them. Edgar decided to give everyone an equal share. But Captain Charlie firmly declared he believed it foolish to even mess with something such as magic, for they were not sure of all its capabilities. Jenny's parents, who at the time had only one child, Elise, grew angry with Captain Charlie and became suspicious of his true motives. "Do you really expect us to believe you don't want the magic for yourself as well?" they questioned him. Feeling quite humiliated, he accepted 10 magical papers. This new Edgar fellow had only just become part of their society, so Charlie did not fully understand why his friends were putting so much trust in him, especially Sue, who had expressed such a great deal of faith in something so unfamiliar. What only made matters worse was that Captain Charlie soon learned that Sue was in love with Edgar. Charlie had loved Sue for a very long time, but she could never bring herself to loving him in return. In their younger days, Charlie had trusted their friendship, hoping to receive Sue's hand at some point in time, but his efforts were to no avail.
Well, I'm not afraid to ask you what I really want to ask you. I feel the goosebumps on my skin. I know my nerves will soon begin to show. Do you know how long? Do you know this song? Do I have a promise of love from you?
If you took the time to tell me,
Do you hear what I say?
what you really want to tell me,
I have always felt this way.
I fear that you would be let down, that your world turned upside down. You never would forget the past. Do you know how long I believed you're wrong? I can't give
had fled by for Captain Charlie, and his heart was somewhat hardened as he grew lonelier and lonelier each year. He tried to press on, but he wasn't exactly sure why. One day, when two young orphan boys named Lewis and Oliver showed up at the harbor, Captain Charlie decided to provide them with a safe home. He quickly considered them as his own sons, and they saw him as their father. 2 years had passed by when the elder son, Lewis, stopped accepting the discipline he received from Captain Charlie and decided to sneak onto a ship with his little brother, leaving no note and giving no warning. Several months later, Captain Charlie received a letter from Lewis saying that he had lost Ollie on the ship during a storm at sea, and having heard rumors that he fell overboard, believed him to be dead. Upon hearing this, the captain grew bitter toward his older son, but he knew that Oliver was so innocent at just 4 years old that he might have stayed back at home if he had known what the consequences might be. The days were long for Captain Charlie. Days became months, and months years, when finally the old man decided it was time to put the magical papers to use, and began to sketch his best representation of what his son might look like at that point in time. Oliver was brought to life 1 year at a time. When the magic faded and Oliver would disappear, Captain Charlie drew him again. He had to keep his son alive somehow, though he knew someday he would run out of papers and Ollie would disappear for good. That someday was coming soon. Captain Charlie grew anxious and restless. He felt a weight on his shoulders that increasingly grew heavier each time he would hear Ollie's laughter. When he would see Jenny walking beside him on the deck of the HM Ward, when he remembered that soon the golden days would have to end for them, for Captain Charlie had used his last paper. One night, Captain Charlie revealed the truth of his son's magical reality to both Jenny and Ollie. He blamed it on Lewis for his lack of judgment leading up to Ollie's disappearance as a small child. Jenny and Ollie were devastated. Ollie had never felt any different than a normal boy would, for the magic had made it so that he believed he was real. He found it troublesome to imagine vanishing into thin air, never to return. They had become such close friends that it felt as if half of their hearts were shattered and could never be mended, and they both agreed it was all because of Captain Charlie. They did not speak to him for days, but encouraged each other with time they did have left.
When you go, where will you be? Will you be in the wind on the sea?
I will be sailing free.
But you
And
and
I
will have to see if we do not forsake the things we found that are good. It may be hard to do, but you know we really should. I guess it's not forever that I get to see you smile, but I'll try to remember.
If I could just remember,
I'll try to remember every once and a
During the early morning hours of one fateful day on the HM Ward, Ollie sat near a window watching the sunrise when the magic that had brought him to life for so many years began to fade, and soon he disappeared. When Jenny woke up later and couldn't find him, she knew just exactly what had happened and cried softly in her cabin. Captain Charlie was still angry at Lewis, and even more angry at himself. next day brought much excitement to the passengers on HM Ward as they landed safely at the port in Sulaxame, where Jenny was surprised to be met by the townspeople in song. While she was somewhat flustered by their greetings and guarantees of a delightful stay, it was all a very timely distraction from the loss of her dear friend, Ollie.
Ah, welcome, Jenny May, to France. We have heard about you from Mayberry. Must be at home with your family. I am. Oh, and soon we must so privileged to assume that you will call Sulaxame your dear and trusted home. Beyond the day from Saint-Jean. Beyond the day from Saint. We'll take you down Main Street, Jenny. We'll give you something sweet to eat. Really? You don't have to. You'll never know just how good you'd feel. Good as the sun on a rainy day. And a place to say, sailing the sea. If you think like me, you'd be surprised at what comes your way. I'm a place from beyond
From Saint Jenny, beyond the new day from Saint. Have a baguette if you feel like that. Whatever you want, we will bake in seconds flat.
Take a bouquet when the sky is gray. So know what to say. Thank you. Merci. Merci. Thank you.
Company.
Oh, it is our pleasure to make you feel so at home. To give you a chance to make you feel at home. And if there's any more that we could offer, well, let us know, 'cause that is just the way we are to. Thank you. Welcome to France, Jenny. Hope you like your stay, Jenny. You'll be fine, fitting well. Hope you have a very swell time here on the Grey Francais. Welcome to France, Jenny. Hope you like your stay, Jenny. You'll be fine, fitting well. Hope you have a very swell time here on the Grey Francais. Whether it's a permanent vacation, even if you're only passing through, or don't want to spend your lifetime with you, we will make it perfect just for you. Whether it's a permanent vacation, even if you're only passing through, or don't want to spend your lifetime with you, we will make it perfect just for you. Beyond the Wow, what a welcome. Well, at least I know I'm so welcome in France, Jenny. I'm sure to like my stay, Jenny. I'll be fine, I'll fit in well. I'm sure that I'll have a swell time here in France.
joined her relatives that day, Elise and Louis Ward, along with their 6 children. Her grandmother, Maybelle May, made Jenny feel right at home in an unfamiliar land. There was so much to discover about her new family, so many friendships that would be created, and she could barely contain the overwhelming joy she experienced in her heart that day. Captain Charlie was struck with wonder, face to face with his son Louis for the first time in such long, lonely years. He was touched by the kindness and hospitality he received by the man who was once such a foolish little boy. Now Louis had little children of his own. The captain suddenly felt his hardened heart begin to break. A change was longing to occur in his soul that could only begin if he truly forgave Louis for the mistakes he had made.
It was so long ago, I took you in. I had no woman to help me teach my children. I could never hate you for the things that you have done. I am still your father. You are still my son.
But about the things I did wrong, I have no excuse to carry on. I have harbored my hate like a storm. What a weight that has become. If you had heard my mind whispering, haunting me at night, it is a bite from a dog and the pain is lasting so long. I was a fool.
You were young.
If you would forgive me,
I will forgive you, son.
there is no mistake I will hold
any
any
longer. I give you my word.
Though troubles have come,
I give you my word. A change has begun. I give you my word. If you will forgive me, there is no mistake I will hold any longer. I give you my word. The troubles have come. I give you my word. A change has begun. I give you my word.
Back in Bar Harbor, the winds were changing and tides were shifting. John and Rose Hampton were recovering from the shock they experienced from Jenny's disappearance. While they heard from local residents that she had been gladly seen accompanying the captain and Ali toward the HM ward, Jenny failed to inform them of her unexpected journey. She had feared that they would beg her to stay and hinder her leaving. On the contrary, as Mr. and Mrs. Hampton were reassuring each other, they would have been delighted for Jenny to find her true family, if only she had cared for such a discovery with them. Rose Hampton had always gone above and beyond for the orphan girls, and she felt that she had treated them as a mother should. Jenny had always returned the kindness as a daughter would, but ran away to seek adventure and left Rose troubled at heart and anxious to understand what she had done wrong in raising the girls. John Hampton stood by Rose's side once again to remind her of the things that he knew Jenny had once loved and cherished. Whatever happened, they trusted she would not be lost to the world, but use the light inside of her to find her way.
young and all alone at night. The care to give would be mine.
Oh, my dear, it brings me great fear to see you in tears. Why are you crying so? Because she's gone.
I am afraid she's forgotten you.
She has not. This we always knew. You are afraid she's forgotten us.
Yes, I'm afraid that she has.
Do you remember the golden days? Do you remember what she had?
A love for the sound of freedom, for the ship and the foghorn blow. Does she know? We are here. We are home.
We have tried our very best, and that's the best that we can do. Do not fret, darling, anymore. What has been done has been done. She has such wisdom and love within, and she was ready to move on. I loved her like a father should. I cared for her like I knew that I would. And now it is time to pray that she would find her way.
And she will find her way.
And she will find her
Closer to the harbor, ailing widow Sue resided at Mount Desert Island Hospital, awaiting a serious report from her doctor. She sat calmly in a room on a little green chair next to a window. As she looked out, she noticed a storm approaching, and soon she could hear the pattering of raindrops as they hit the panes loudly. She felt weak, frail, and cold. Widow Sue had many memories that raced through her mind, ones of her younger days and the friends she had, the man she loved, Edgar, who had died just a few years after they married. She remembered Captain Charlie, how much he cared for her all those years, though she never felt quite the same way he did. She could only love him like she would a dear brother. Something started to grow in Widow Sue's soul, a feeling of sorrow for days gone by and a feeling of hope for those friends she held dear. She trusted everything would be all right, that Captain Charlie would find joy, that Jenny was safely in France with Maybelle and the rest of the family, that all which might have been broken would be mended and resolved. A knock at the door sounded. The expression in the eyes of a doctor who entered the room just then told Widow Sue all she needed to know. She was sick. She was dying. Somehow, in a moment that had such potential to ruin her day, Widow Sue smiled as a certain unexplainable peace filled her soul. She watched the storm until it passed. When the calm returned, Mr. Hampton escorted her home. Widow Sue rode by the port for the last time that day as the evening sun shed its beautiful golden light over Bar Harbor.
I hands are growing cold, and this world is getting old, and everyone here can see that I'm about to leave it. If you'd please say a prayer for me, because it's getting hard to breathe. Though I'm not afraid of departing from this world, for out of the night will come a day, and out of the day will come a light. And I don't mind if he wants to take me now. It's the Lord's will, not mine. My hands are growing cold, and this world is getting old, and everyone here can see that I'm about to leave it. If you'd please say a prayer for me, because it's getting hard to breathe. Though I'm not afraid of departing from this world, for out of night will come a day, and out of the day will come a light. And I don't mind if he wants to take me now. It's the Lord's will, not mine. I don't mind if he wants to take me now. It's the Lord's will, not mine.
3 weeks later, Maybelle received the word of Widow Sue's death. While words could not express the immense sadness she felt in the days that followed, it could not be compared to the pain it brought to Captain Charlie's heart. He had sent Widow Sue a letter as soon as they arrived in France to assure her of Jenny's safety, but she had never returned it, leaving the old captain restless. Now he knew exactly why he had never heard from his cherished friend. Captain Charlie was angry that he did not take better care of Widow Sue, though he could not have prevented her death. He was angry that he had never gotten to marry her, but she would never have been able to reciprocate the same feelings. He was angry that he spent all of his years navigating the HM ward instead of looking after his boys. But would that have killed the spirit of adventure and rebellion in Lewis? Captain Charlie loathed himself, for all these things could not be changed. He found himself with two choices now: allow the ghost of his regrets to continue haunting him, or to free himself from the prison of his past.
Am I just being selfish? Am I living in vain? Am I losing a part of me that somehow I knew could not remain? It was there when I faltered. It was there when I fell. It was the cause of a million things God didn't want me to do. Oh, sinner, how can there be a way for you? I'm by myself, yet I see you by my side with every can have a brand new start. Was I a fool because I loved her? Or was I naturally inclined? Should not love be in the heart of the wise? Or did I only live a little? Did God have something more to say? He was telling me to listen, but then he took my love away. How could I tell him what was wrong? How could I hate him all along? How could I listen to myself? How could I? I'm by myself, yet I see you by my side with every changing tide. You're unchanging all the time. When I am lost, you now tell me where to go, and no more am I alone. Though my heart may fail, your light will bring me home. Your love will still prevail. No more am I alone.
Captain Charlie was no longer a prisoner of love, though he would always remember his life as an artist on the sea. With all of his attempts at creating the perfect picture of the life that he wanted, he could not prevent the storms that tossed him to and fro. He explained to Jenny the jubilation that he was feeling as he prepared to leave France for America. Jenny could see the change in him. Before, it was as if the jolly spirit that he embodied was only a curtain that he hid behind, where he sat all alone in the darkness. Now, as she observed, the true gladness in his smile reflected some great light that had found its way through that curtain, and he opened his heart to the joy that had awaited him all of his life. The people of Sulaksame watched the HM Ward depart and said their goodbyes to the captain, wishing him the best as he returned once again to the expanse of the great deep.
Farewell, dear captain. I hope you find your peace. Sail on, dear captain, but set your anchor
Nearly 3 years passed by, quickly, or so it felt to Jenny, who had found that her life in Sulaksame was just as pleasant as it had been in Bar Harbor. However, it was different in many ways. She rode into town often with her family, who all managed to fit in one small, rusty yellow car. The errands she ran were now not by herself, but with her nieces and nephews, who she was constantly keeping out of trouble. She was thankful for the change that had taken place when she left her home behind to seek something new, and now all she felt was lacking in her new life was Ollie. Jenny could not understand the depth of regrets that her old friend Captain Charlie had experienced, but she believed that his choices had led to her loneliness now, for even though she was surrounded by a loving family, she missed the one boy who brought inspiring energy to her life. She did not know where else to find it except in his laugh, the way he spoke to her, the way he treated others before he treated himself. She missed him greatly, and while she longed to be perfectly happy, she was not. She would give anything in the world to see him one more time. She would speak often with Maybelle and her sister Elise, who were able to provide some comfort to Jenny's soul. Miles away, there was a little cafe on Main Street in Sulaksame, where a man who many called Mr. Harold sat in the corner booth beneath a hovering lantern. He worked intensely with pen and paper as an inventor working under the authority of an older man named Alvin Benson. Mr. Benson had known Mr. Harold for a long time and wanted his help in his shop. But in order for him to get the job, Mr. Harold had to prove his reliability by inventing something new every 2 weeks, building it and giving it to Mr. Benson to test. Mr. Harold was a skillful man who worked well with machinery and understood physics, but he had found himself very distracted as of late. On his afternoon breaks from work, Mr. Harold observed passerbyers outside the cafe as they went about their day. On one occasion, he was taken aback by a young woman in an emerald green dress. She stood out from the sea of gray jackets and plain attire that surrounded her. Her eyes radiated the vibrant color of peppermint leaves. He felt as though he had seen these eyes before, but it had been so long. If that was so, and even still, it felt just like a familiar dream.
I'm having dreams of beautiful things that manage to make me go mad. I see a girl
sight of this girl revived Mr. Harold's bewilderment about a series of dreams he had experienced 2 years prior. For many nights he would fall asleep and enter a dream world where he worked on a ship called the H.M. Ward. In these visions they called him Ollie. He served as a deckhand for his father, the captain, and he was dear friends with a lovely girl named Jenny, who bore a striking resemblance to the girl in the emerald green dress. Back then, Mr. Harold had enjoyed the alternate life he experienced in the successive dreams, but the story which had been unfolding itself night after night abruptly and confoundingly came to an end. Mr. Harold and Jenny began to see each other in town and had even become acquainted. Jenny felt there was something familiar about Mr. Harold, but she couldn't quite grasp what it was. Something bittersweet, for he reminded her of Ollie, of home. Mr. Harold grappled with the mysterious connection he felt to Jenny. Back at the Ward residence, Jenny's nieces and nephews wondered about her life in America. She recalled the lullaby she had been sung numerous times by Mr. and Mrs. Hampton.
Don't worry, little ones, when days don't go your way. You have so much for you waiting. So dream about when troubles came my way, they would be there to say they loved me. And now I'm feeling
The next morning, Jenny and her family rode into town to spend time by the crowded shore where a town picnic was being held. Jenny preferred to stay near the dunes where she could observe everything from a higher place. Meanwhile, Mr. Harold had experienced the strangest realization. Through his dreams, he had been with Jenny all along. When the magic of Captain Charlie's papers wore off and Ollie disappeared at sea over in France, Mr. Harold's dreams simultaneously ceased. Mr. Harold could not recall much from his early years of being a child, but he knew that he was found and taken care of by Alvin Benson's extended family until he was old enough to fend for himself. What the captain and Lewis never knew was that Ollie did not actually die in the ocean. In fact, he was found and given a new name. How else could Mr. Harold know Jenny May, who had never been seen in France before? Captain Charlie had remembered Ollie as the little boy he was, and so used the magic to assume his appearance 15 years older and bring him to life. But little did the captain know that Ollie was already living, and his name was Harold. Harold was eager to speak to Jenny about these things and hurried through the crowd until he saw her standing atop the dunes near the shore. He ran to her and told her all that he had discovered, and her eyes were opened, knowing in one dreamlike moment that Mr. Harold's voice and spirit really did belong to the dear soul she once knew.
On countless streams, I've seen many faces. How could it be they were all with you? In those countless dreams, I've seen many faces. None I know as well. Could it be a stranger in this world? Could it be I've heard your voice before? I've had countless dreams. I've seen many faces. None I know as well as you. In the crowd, somebody far away is really quite so near. In the crowd, when you see the eyes of the one you hold so dear, to your heart in the crowd, however loud the people are. There's the voice belonging to the one I love. I thought that I was lost when I was on my way into town. I saw you in the busyness of people here today. I forgot all my fears when I saw you walking here among the crowd. My heart skipped a beat when I heard you call my name above the crowd. I can finally see your familiar face. For I've had countless dreams. I've seen many faces. But there's none I know as well as you.
Those mysterious dreams quickly became a beautiful reality which they shared together. Led by Harold's encouragement, Jenny overcame her fears of facing those she had deserted in Bar Harbor and was finally ready to return to America. No longer would she live with such regrets, a lesson she had learned from the captain. As Harold and Jenny drew near to Bar Harbor, it was full of life, shining brightly in the morning sun. It was not so dull as Jenny remembered it. In fact, it seemed to be bursting with color and light as the nostalgic breeze returned her to the harbor. She heard the clanging of the church bells echoing through the town and over the waves. Upon the hill of Agamot Park, she saw people in their Sunday best, watching the bustling bay. Mr. Harold and Jenny descended the ramp, eager to find the Hamptons, who they found on the morning stroll with the orphan girls in the village green. The Hamptons opened their arms and held her in a most welcoming embrace. She was finally home.
than I knew before. You're my family, I will run no more. Golden words